Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Guess what? We are back. Yes, I'm back. This is your well woman, Lashana of Lashana Leonard Moore Wellness. Eat well, think well, live well. Thank you for joining me. This is season 6. This is the kickoff for the Well Life Podcast, season 6. We took our winter hiatus for December 2020. If you were not able to catch that last episode to plan or not to plan for 2021, I strongly encourage you to go and listen to that episode. It will touch you, inspire you, confirm for you, bless you, and so much more. Remember that the Well Life Podcast is available on all digital platforms. So for those of you who love to listen to podcasts, you can do that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Anchor, and there are about 11 other platforms that host this podcast. So I want to encourage you to connect with me. And then for those of you who love to watch the visual, the live, we are here on the Well Life TV via YouTube. So thank you so much for joining me. Just to remind our viewers, for those of you who are new, what the Well Life Podcast is all about. Our focus and our mission is to elevate the lives of women in wellness and holistically, mind, body, soul, and spirit. So all of these episodes are geared toward conversations and topics of discussion to really feed and nurture your mental and emotional health, your physical health, enlighten your spiritual wellness, and the complete gamut of who you are, of who we are. So as we get ready to jump into this awesome, engaging podcast, I want to have a wellness check with you. Now, if you are listeners of the Well Life Podcast, you already are aware of what this means, okay? And this is simply our opportunity to take a deep breath, to inhale deep through our nose and to exhale through our mouths. Now you're listening and watching in various places. If you're not able to do the wellness check, I want you to just do a mental check-in with yourself, get a gauge, try to get settled and aligned with where you are and how you're feeling. This podcast is for you. This is your pavilion and your safe place. So if you're available and you're able to do this, let's join in together and let's do it. Everyone take a deep inhale and exhale through your mouth. Yeah, let's do that again. On your own timing, take a deep inhale, everybody, through your nose. And take an exhale. And as you exhale, I just want you to relax and release all of the mental and emotional traffic. This is an opportunity to settle down your pace and your momentum for the day. We are kicking off this season, not just on this particular day, but it's March 1st, it's spring, and March represents so many things. We're highlighting March as Women's History Month. It's Endometriosis Awareness Month. It's also the International Women's Day, the 8th of this month. And for those of you who have seen the hashtag on social media, you'll also see that today has been honored as Black Women's Day. So that simply means that we're honoring each other as Black women, not just for those who are entrepreneurs or small business owners, but just the Black woman. So my salute to you. My heartbeat, that's my sign of connecting with you, my honor to you. To all of us who are Black women, my salute to you. Happy Black Women's Day. The last announcement that I have before we jump off into this, on behalf of the month of March and all of the wonderful things that women of color particularly are doing, I am announcing a scholarship that has been created in honor of my mother, Dorothy Leonard, with the work that she did tirelessly and for many, many years with women. And it's called the Young Well Woman of Excellence Scholarship. My mother founded an organization, a ministerial organization called the Women of Excellence back in 1987. And this ministry and organization grew and grew all the way through the early 2000s. And it was all about fostering the emotional, the mental care, and healing of women. And as the organization grew, year after year, they went on to establish chapters and to offer scholarships. And so, starting tomorrow, the link will be live for young women. This is national. This scholarship is particularly for national applicants. So that means you have to be in the States. But the opportunity to apply for this scholarship is both for young women of color who are creatives, as well as young women of color who are pursuing some type of scholarly attribute. Now, your scholarship funds can be used internationally. So that means if there is a pursuit or some type of tuition or goal that you need the funding support for that's not necessarily in the States, you're applicable to apply. I want you to go to the website. I'm going to put this on. I don't go now, but as soon as the show is over, you can go to blackbodicepfilm.com. So my film is sponsoring this scholarship, Black Bodice. And you can go to blackbodicepfilm.com, click on Get Involved, and you'll see the scholarship with all of the criteria, the information, and the link to apply. Throughout this month, I will also be announcing organizations and female philanthropists that are connecting with us on this scholarship. So you guys, I am just completely I'm over the moon, and I'm happy about it. It's my honor to continue my mother's legacy in this way, in the way that she would love to see young women thriving in their pursuits. And I have her with me today, so y'all know that she is never too far from me and from what I'm doing. That's my girl, my hero, and my queen of all time. So let's jump into this discussion. I want to introduce to some and bring familiarity to others this idea of Blaxit. Hey, you guys, I see everybody who's on. Thank you. Miss West is here. Just quick shout outs. Lady Holmes, Miss Holmes is here. Miss Alexander is here. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to the Well Life Podcast. We're getting ready to talk about Blaxit. What is this? So by definition, Blaxit is the immigration of Black Americans to other countries to escape racism. That's the gist of what the Blaxit definition is. And it's called a phenomenon. I don't know if I would sensationalize it to be such a phenomenon because this has been happening for quite a few years. But I believe, number one, as the country of America experiences what I say, I like to call it a more chronic inflammation of racism and systemic racism and police brutality and unfair treatment of various kinds. It's interesting to see that more Blacks are choosing to leave America and live abroad. Now, there are other reasons why Blaxit exists and why some Blacks are leaving the country. A few other reasons that Blacks are choosing to leave is for a better quality of life, to find work opportunities. Also, it has been researched that some Black singles are leaving to find love and to marry. Some Blacks are choosing to leave America so that they can have an opportunity to retire abroad. And even reported that some are choosing to leave for various tax purposes. So the reasons are very, very broad. And to the disclosure and to the care of law enforcement, let me say that this is not to generalize law enforcement as a whole of being corrupt. But what we are, and I want to pull up some studies that I found. What we're finding is that there's a study back in 2019 by the National Academy of Sciences. They found that Black men were about 2.5 times more likely than white men to be killed by police. Another analysis by Nature Human Behavior conducted 100 million traffic stops and determined that Black people were far more likely to be pulled over by police than whites. So the disclaimer there is that we know that we can't lump all law enforcement in the same category. My brother's brother-in-law is a law enforcer, is on the SWAT, I think, as a matter of fact. Milton is in SWAT back in LA, Los Angeles. So it's not just clumping everyone into this generality, but realizing that it is a reality in this country. And so we're fighting to find ways to garner peace and to advocate. Is Blaxit the solution for all of our issues? No, it's not. But what I want to probe into today with this podcast is some of the reasons that it's happening. So allow me to introduce to you our special guest for today. Her name is Tallie Dubois. She is, number one, a Black woman. She lives abroad. She's going to share her story. She's a family lifestyle blogger. She's an African-American woman. She is an affectionate wife and mother of two precious babies. If you all go to her lifestyle Instagram page, you'll see her family life and all of the things that Tallie is doing to lift her voice, but also to shed the beautiful diversity that happens when we're living outside of the box. So Tallie, thank you for joining me on the kickoff of season 6. I appreciate it so much. What I want to absolutely. Thank you so much. I want to ask you to give us just a brief snapshot of your background, where you're from, a little bit of your educational background, and then we'll lead into what that life-defining moment was to lead you to the decision that you made.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Florida, West Palm Beach, Florida, to be exact. I'm a first generation American, so my parents immigrated to the United States from Haiti in search of a better life or the American dream. So me and my siblings were born and raised there, and we were raised specifically in Wellington, Florida, this like small, predominantly white suburbs. And so I've always been into the arts and just the creative lifestyle, I guess. And so I went to art school in high school, and it was through art school that I started thinking about moving to New York City to attend drama school and kind of escape that small town lack of diversity, I guess, that was happening in Florida and that Southern culture. And so I applied for a drama school in New York City. I auditioned, I was accepted, and I never looked back. And I moved to New York City, and that's where things kind of kicked off for me. I met my husband there. That's where I went to college and really discovered and tapped into unity.
Wow. So you and your husband did meet in the States.
We did meet in the States, yes, in New York.
Okay. I want to also just pause a moment. I know there is a slight delay in our response via screen. We're actually broadcasting about 6 hours earlier than we usually do. Per my previous episodes, the Well Life typically podcast or broadcast Monday evenings. Tallie is in Dublin, Ireland. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, give or take. So we're 6 hours different, and I'm Central Standard Time. Yeah. So it's about 8:30, 8:40. Well, it's about 8:45 in the evening, where she is. Hopefully, the kiddos have winds down a little bit and getting them ready for bedtime. And all systems go.
Yes, they're all asleep. But yeah, it's about 8:47 here.
Yeah, so it's just interesting. It's light and bright where I am. The day is well underway. Yeah, but I want to ask you, since you were born in Florida, you are originally Haitian by descent. Your parents,
Mm,
you were living in
hmm.
Florida, moved to New York, which is such a large melting pot.
Yeah,
With a performing arts as my background, I spent quite a bit of time in New York. Love the diversity and the rhythm of that place. So you do get a more diverse, integrated experience being up north.
yeah.
What was the life defining moment? So what happened with you or with the pair of you that made you start considering this different idea? I've been communicating with women probably for the last few months. I shared with my husband prior to getting married that I had contemplated and thought thoroughly a few times about living abroad. Going and either living abroad for several months at a time or literally just considering taking up a new culture of life in other places. As it has a lot of benefits, but it has a lot of nuances to it as well. So, Tallie, what was your experience or your life defining moment that brought you to this decision?
Yeah. Um, I think it was George Floyd, right? And a
Mm,
mixture of George Floyd and COVID. So I started out the pandemic. We're in New York City. We're living in a small two-bedroom apartment. And we were living in Astoria, and it was a really great neighborhood. It was lovely, and we had a great life. And New York was fun. Like, I love New York. I will always say, like,
mhm.
I'm a diehard New Yorker. It's the
Right.
best city in the world, always my favorite city in the world, and it's so diverse and it's so beautiful. But
It
I
is.
think when George Floyd happened, that just broke the camel for me, like, so I just think, when that happened, something just awakened in me again. When I first moved to New York, I got into the work of like social justice because
Mhm.
um, I got into a bunch of groups at my university, and I want to say I went to the new school, and the new school was very I guess, liberal or left leaning, if you will. So a lot of the classes that I took, like Black psychology and women in gender studies, were sort of helping me to become more aware of my identity and learn more about myself and why things are. And, just classes like race, class, and
Yeah.
education or biology, and just learning about all the different isms. So I just spent all this time in college just educating myself and marching and protesting. Um,
Mhm.
and so I remember, God goodness, when I first got to college, I'm trying to remember who it was who had just gotten murdered by the police. It was Brown. Brown.
Oh,
I'm like blanking out right now. Last name was
yeah.
Brown.
I know who you're talking about. God, we have had so
Yes.
many.
It's been so many, that's right. But it was
Such a
point blank. It was
roster.
point blank. That's right. I'm sure it'll come back to me. But I remember protests set off in New York City, and I protested and through all the women's marches and all the different things that happened. And so for a while then I became a mother, and I kind of just settled into life and kind of
Mhm.
turned off the news and kind of just became destigmatized and turned off the noise and just chose to kind of see if I could just ignore and just maybe that'll help me live a happier life.
Right. Right.
But then when
Michael
George
Brown.
Floyd happened, that's
That's
right.
it.
When George Floyd's happened, I just something in me just awakened and I became so angry. Um, and I remember just thinking to myself, okay, using my voice on the social media platforms, choosing to read more books. Like I was like, all right, let me start reading some Asada Shakur and some Angela Davis. Let me
Yeah.
start educating myself. Let me start educating other people, having hard
Right.
conversations once again. This has been happening for years.
Yeah.
I mean, I've dealt with racism like all my life as a child. But something about this was just different. I was just angry and I was uncomfortable and I was
Mhm.
also scared. So I think that
Yeah.
was the difference where it's like all my life I've just learned to deal with it, like, my Haitian parents, I remember them giving us the speeches as children, just saying, listen, like, this is the life here, and you have to understand that as a Black person, you just have certain boundaries you can't cross. Like my mom would tell us that,
Right.
your white counterparts can do XYZ, but you can't. And that's just how the life is. And that's it,
Right.
but you're here to go to college, get an education, get a job, and live your life. And that's
Yeah.
it. So
And
I
that's
just,
interesting too, because I think that our upbringing, our parents end up having conversations with us that the non-Black or people of color families and generations will not experience.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's very, and then coming into the States for the purpose of having a better life.
that's
You
right.
are very fine-tuned and focused on making sure that you build this quote-unquote American dream. And so many new enlightenments, I think, is happening in an influx with Black people as it relates to the truth behind our nation. And a lot is not really emerging. I believe a lot is being exposed. Yeah.
That's
Go
right.
ahead.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think with my parents, they came for a better life, and, they just wanted us to learn how to ignore the noise and thrive. They're like, yeah, there's racism, but listen, push through, deal with it, and you'll be fine, But something in me was just like, I can't ignore it this time. I'm too angry, and I'm also scared. And though I lived in New York City and it was very diverse,
Yeah.
and New York is this very, very progressive place and very inclusive, there's a lot of actions that you deal with on a daily basis, and you're not exempt from the craziest of the craziest
Yeah.
experiences of racism. I mean,
Very
I've
true.
experienced racism in New York. I mean, I remember I was pregnant with my son. I was like 9 months pregnant, going to like the last doctor's visit, and like being chased in the middle of the street by someone yelling the N-word,
Wow.
unprovoked. I don't know what happened. And I was pregnant, just like trying to like run in the middle of traffic and get away from this person. And that scarred me so bad at that was 2019. That scarred me so bad that I like stopped taking the train, because I was like afraid as a pregnant woman. And no one
Yeah.
did anything. They all just kind of watched me, but no one like defended me or jumped in the way. And I'm like visibly heavily pregnant. And
Oh my
so
God. That's
all
scary.
these, yeah, so all these experiences come around. And so when George Floyd happened, I was like, wow, we just watched this man die on camera. We watched
Right.
a knee put to his neck for
Yes.
what felt like a century, and it was just mind-boggling to me. And so I had this conversation with my husband, and I was just like, listen, like, I don't know. I was like, I don't see myself retiring here. Like, maybe we have to figure out, like, okay, do we raise our kids here, or
Mhm.
or do we go somewhere else? Because I was also thinking about my kids, and just the fact that
Right.
they're biracial, so their struggle is going to be way different from mine. But then again, people who are biracial, who have the predominantly Black features in society, tend to be treated just like your average Black person. So I think I was just
Right.
very much afraid for my kids, and just like, okay, like I have a son, I have a daughter, like how will they be treated? And I've seen the little microaggressions with my daughter and like the other
Absolutely.
kids at school and the other parents. I was just like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
oh, like we're gonna have to start. And and I have been doing the work of introducing race through books and everything, but something in me was just like, I don't want to live here anymore, but I also don't know what we can do. So then we started brainstorming countries like Canada or certain
Mhm.
places, and we were just like, oh my goodness, how long will a visa take? How long will the process of immigrating? We want to do it now while the kids are young. So then,
Tallie, it,
anyways, I at the time, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say it's interesting that you're sharing these questions and these concerns. You have biracial children. For those who do not know, Tallie's husband is not a Black man. And so, and that was within the states, that was within America, notwithstanding considerations of what the challenges would be living abroad. But you're bringing up a lot of touch points, a lot of points that I'd like to touch on just really quickly. One of our life friends are saying, we were often told of the American dream without giving the option of seeing anything different. And that's so very true. With the influx of education and self-education, because many Blacks did not go to an HBCU. My brother did. I didn't go to an HBCU. I went to university here in Houston. And so, I didn't take African American studies or read a lot of the books from our Black authors and literature of that sort. A lot of it had to be self-initiated. So we're now in a time where Blacks are being educated. People of color are being educated about the history of America, the history of Black America. And then it's causing you to really kind of step back and ponder just the possibilities and opportunities in this country and beyond that. My parents were extremely different in personality as it relates to how big to live. My father, who has always been a big initiator of my brother and I stepping out and experiencing and exploring life. My mother, who kept us very close and wanted us to be very close. And she traveled with my father, but she could have done without it. It just wasn't a big thing with her. My father's traveled internationally quite a bit. But my mother didn't care for it quite so much in terms of something that was her high in life. But where we are, and it's interesting to hear you also express that the life-defining moment for you was the George Floyd murder, which is what it was. That triggered something in you that broke the camel's back and caused you to consider something drastically different other than this country, because there is more than either what we've been introduced to, what we have been welcomed or invited to explore. And I think that that's really happening. I want to say something really quick as it relates to the murder of George Floyd. Ghana particularly offered dual citizenship to Black Americans. It was shared in various headlines. Come home, we'll help you develop a life here. And so whereas it may not be the continent of Africa for everyone, it was amazing to see internationally, globally, how everyone responded to this murder, caught live on recording. And you think about those that are not seen or are not televised. It created such a parade of anger and disparage and even desperation as to what are we going to do about this? We know that America owes the Black people reparations. But in having conversation with my brother and my husband one day, because we discuss this quite often, I said, you know what, you guys, the matter of wellness and our well-being to me almost would forego the reparations to see my family well and safe and taken care of. And if I feel like my entire family would be on board, I would reconsider, I would revisit again the idea of immigrating from America. So this life-defining moment, once again, hearing you say that it was George Floyd who did it for you, and then Demetria Brown, who, for those of you who saw the video promo for this episode, Demetria Brown, who was on CNN. Are you familiar with Demetria, Tallie?
Not too familiar, no.
She was, I can't remember. She was in law enforcement. can't say if it was a parole officer or she was working in the prison system, and her father was wrongfully accused for a crime of which he had served 40 plus years for, finally getting released. And then she experiences the George Floyd murder. And for her too, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. She resigned. She moved forward with plans that she had kind of been fantasizing about or playing around with in her mind as she moved to Mexico. She has a wonderful blog now about traveling abroad, and she, along with so many others, have made this move. So take us to your transition. Let us know where it is that you all moved to and what that establishment was like. Just give us a snapshot of some of the variances that you experienced there in a new country versus here in America, and how were they responsive to you?
Yeah. So basically, I needed help with my kids. I just needed a break. I decided that I just need to get away and get a break from America. And so my husband is Irish. He's from Ireland. And so we decided I'll get a break and I'll take like a nice 6-month vacation. So it was not going to be permanent initially. It was just going to be like a nice long vacation and just to refresh and get away from America, because I started just to feel that I was being consumed by the election, by all the craziness I was waking up to. It was just consuming me and really interfering with my mental health. So we got to Ireland, and I want to say within about a month of being here, I told my husband I'm not going back to New York. Like, I'm not going back to America. I was like, I want to stay here, and this is where we're gonna raise our kids, and that's it. And he was like, listen, I need you to be 100% sure we can move forward with citizenship and residency and all that stuff, but I need you to be 100% sure. So I just did my research about policing over here and healthcare and the difference in quality of life. And so for me, quality of life was a big deal. I want my kids to be able to thrive and to feel safe. And Ireland did rank last year, 2020, they did rank number 2 for best quality of life on the World Index. Yeah, number 2. Yeah, so to raise a family and quality of life. But I just did my research, and I found out that the police here, for instance, don't carry guns. It's only like special police.
Really?
So only like 5,000 special police are allowed to carry guns, and these are often police that are called in dangerous situations. And just the fact that they don't have the same problem with mass shootings, school shootings, or police brutality. Now, there's not to say that there isn't racism here or that it does not exist, but it is not on, I guess if you're comparing it to America, it's not on the same scale. You would not feel safe. And, so far since I've been here, I have felt very safe and very welcome, and I have not dealt with any crazy instances of racism or microaggressions. People have been very welcoming, and the minute that they hear that I'm from America, it's usually intriguing, like, oh my gosh, like, what is it like over there? And they're very intrigued.
Everyone has been watching America.
That's right. So they're just very intrigued about my experience, especially being Black, being from America. And so they usually ask questions, but they're very friendly, and my kids are having a great experience. But that was just the idea of safety for me, and just not wanting to be scared or feel like I'm going to be hunted down, or that I could be sleeping in my bed one night and be shot to death, and just like wanting my kids to live a life of also feeling safe and not being worried for my daughter and son when they become teenagers. Or when they become adults. And so that was one of the things that I did my research on, was just policing here, race relations, healthcare, cost of living, and opportunities, education, and just the fact that Ireland is making advancements to become more inclusive and just educating themselves. And they don't have the same, thankfully, the same also political atmosphere, because a lot of things here that are highly politicized are already legal here or illegal. So for instance, guns here are just illegal. The general public is not allowed to have guns. So that, for instance, gun ownership was a big thing for me, because that was always one of the big fears living in America, growing up in the South, the amount of
Right.
guns that were around me. And so here that's not an issue because it's just illegal.
So a gun control policy is not even required there, because the culture and the legal parameters will not permit casual gun carrying.
No. Yeah, no.
Wow.
So it's just such a different culture and a different setting. But I just, yeah, so I said I was not going back. And I've been here now for 6 months, and I don't regret it. I haven't looked back, and it's been quite an amazing journey. And, very, very thankful and very happy to be here.
Amazing.
Yes.
We're pulling back multiple fibers of this country, the history of which, the true history of which it was founded upon. Slavery and the Declaration of Independence versus the Juneteenth celebrations that we have here in the country. Those are not very old situations. Those are not very old laws that have been passed. And it's amazing to see, like I said before, I believe it's not so much of a new occurrence as I believe that it's an exposure of the reality, very sadly so, of what's happening here in the country. While everyone cannot just uproot and leave, I think that it's going to be very important for all Americans, not just Blacks, not just people of color. I think it's going to be important for everyone to consider educating themselves on the brutality of this country and the evil and the hate of which it was honestly founded upon. I think that alone is just a major resistance here, and it's even causing a lot of Blacks to have to go back and rediscover history, make sure that we find that we have accurate information as it relates to historical events. And that's something that that we're going to be doing. The podcast is going to be doing this year is making sure that those resources are provided. Because with education, then there's knowledge, there's applied knowledge that can ensure that we've got policy change, legislation. Change really has to happen in the mind, and then reaching out to create those changes in the community, and really trying to rally white Americans together with this cause, because at this point, it's more so a responsibility for our white counterparts to learn about reality of the country in order for us to really, really move the needle in a way that truly matters. Tallie, have you encountered at this point, and it's still fairly new, have there been any challenges that you've encountered? I know when they hear that you moved from America, like some of my friends abroad, they're like, oh my God, LaShanna, we are so sorry. We see what's going on. And, the tables have turned.
Yeah.
With America being that leading country with such pristine values, the tables have turned. Have there been any challenges for you so far?
No, I can't say there have been challenges. Like I said, whenever I meet people or just enrolling my daughter in school, there's always this, intriguing aspect, like, oh, she's American. Okay. And they're looking at me wide-eyed, like, oh, you just lived through, they're looking at me like, so you just lived through a Trump administration? What was that like? Was it as crazy as it was sounding on the news? And they're just like, they don't want to be too direct and ask too many questions, but they're definitely intrigued, on and I've had people point blank asking, what was that experience like living there under Trump and with all those people who were just so bold with their racism.
Right.
And just the fact that, like, listen, like, we're happy you're here. Like, if you want to find refuge here, go ahead. We don't have
Yeah.
the same craziness. So they're usually just very intrigued, but I haven't had any challenges, thankfully, thus far. It's been a pretty smooth ride, I'd have to say.
Good.
Yeah.
And hopefully it remains as such, because your
Yes.
children at this point will know more of their upbringing and their childhood memories
Yeah.
being there in Ireland,
Yeah.
and your husband teaching them about their heritage, and they've got such a rich background with the
That's
both
right.
of you.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Let me ask you this. What would you say to those who are considering leaving and living abroad? You talked about the research that you did, which is so important. For those who are single versus those who are married or who have a partner versus those who have children versus those who are looking for various things in an academic pursuit or just the freedom of living creatively. There are a lot of things to consider when taking that leap, and the research is paramount. What advice would you give to those who are considering Blaxiting?
Um, yeah, so I'd say number one is research, research, research. I mean, when
Yeah.
I got here, then I started doing my research because as much as I just wanted to just, up and leave, I had to make sure that my kids were also going to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think your screen has frozen,
Oh,
Tallie. There
sorry.
you
Is it
are.
on? Okay. And so one of the things that I was a little afraid about when I moved here was just diversity, because I didn't really know much. Like, okay, is it diverse?
Yeah.
Um, and upon there, I discovered, okay, there is actually a huge Black community here in Ireland, a huge Black diaspora here in Ireland. There's a lot of Africans. There's a lot of Black Americans like myself I've met other Black Americans, surprisingly, who've moved from America to Ireland to, get their master's degrees or just to work here.
Yeah.
So I think it's all about research. So I just wanted to make sure that, I would sort of see representation here, be able to fit in and thrive and live here, be able to work here, so a career wise, finish my education, my kids' education, um, the cost of living. So these were all things that came into play, as well as what is the policing like? What are the race relations? What is their political atmosphere? So we considered everything before we moved here, and we did our research and we asked around and everything. Just reaching out to other people like myself who are Black here, or who are Hispanic here, or who are Asian here. There's a huge Asian community, a huge Latin and Hispanic community. So just reaching out, yeah. So it's very, very diverse here in Ireland, more than I thought. So
Yeah.
they're really trying to move forward and just be more inclusive. So just reaching out to people and doing that research, and then I was like, okay, I think this is the place to move, and everyone is fairly polite, and I like the fact that I can feel safe. Safety
Yeah.
is number one for me. The isms, some form of the isms are always going to exist in every single country. I want
Yeah.
everyone to know that there's no perfect utopia, no perfect country out there that has like no isms. Like, some form of the isms are going to exist in every single country, but it's also just about quality of life and safety. And I think that's what made me leave America, was the fact that I couldn't be sure that I could be safe.
Yes.
I did not feel safe, and quality of life did not feel the same there. That American dream to me became an illusion. So
Yeah. Yeah. The quality of life is major. True. And I'm glad that you touched on the point and the reality that no place is perfect.
no.
every country is going to have a certain dimension or temperature of politics, the way that the system is governed. But the research is important. And then I would even encourage those of you, and while we're having, before we wrap up, if you're catching us live and you'd like to ask questions, by all means, go ahead and submit those questions too. I would encourage individuals to try and find cultural groups within your city or nearby cities, or maybe even virtual now, since we're living in a pandemic, to really get an up close and personal reality check on the culture of other places. Everywhere that we've traveled, my husband and I have talked about Australia. Australia is in that top 5 as well, along with Ireland, in being one of the friendliest and the safest countries that we have. Let's see. We have a comment. Natalie says, research is so important. Yes. We also have to be honest with ourselves about the information we discover. How was it accepting an entirely different culture? So she has a question to you, Tallie. How was it accepting an entirely different culture? Thank you for your question, Natalie.
Yeah. So I think when I married my husband, I always knew a little bit about Irish culture. I didn't know too much, but he educated me. I mean, I'm Haitian, he's Irish, and we always said, okay, we're going to educate each other on our cultures. I mean, we visited Ireland previously to settling here. We would vacation here once a year. Same thing, we'd go to Haiti and vacation in Haiti once a year. And sort of just celebrates both of the cultures. But I think, yeah, definitely coming here, it was a bit of a culture shock.
Sure.
I think,
and what did you feel that?
I'd say, I'd say, for instance, here in Ireland, they're not as, I guess, loud, I'd say, as Americans, as bold, not to be rude. I think Americans are just very out there, and we're so like personality in your face, and we brag a lot, and we can, I guess that's confidence. It could be ego. Here, not so much. They're very, very humble here. And so that was a major culture.
You froze again, Tallie. You there? There you are.
Sorry,
okay.
Yeah. I'm very open and transparent, and I share my life, and I get personal. So I think here it's just like, oh, okay, you're getting a little, So they're just very humble here, and a bit of a more quieter culture. And like I said, yes, racism is here too. It's probably a little more swept under the rug because they're not as open. But I'd say that was more so of the culture shock, is just that Americans are very over the top, and here it's just very it's very humble and just like a little quieter. And of course, they have a language. So upon coming, I'm doing my master's in education, so I have to learn the language and just learn different customs. But it wasn't anything that I already didn't know or that I wasn't used to. I think when I came here, what really was surprising was just the fact that like they're not as boastful or over the top. So for instance, when you're going for a job in America, you really need to like hype up your resume and just really hype up your capabilities. Whereas here, you need to be very humble about it. They don't like if you're just like, oh yes, and by the way, I do this, I do this, I do that. I have a MA this and that. Yeah. So I had to learn to, okay, bring it down a little bit and I guess just be a little more humble. And they really live within their means. So they're not a very show-off culture, I guess, the way I'd be used to living in New York, where you're really flaunting your lifestyle. We're all competing, I guess, in New York or in America. So it's just not exactly the same here, I guess. So that was, I think, was
good points to highlight.
Most of the culture shock for me. Yeah.
A lot more conservative, it seems.
Yeah.
and be a little less flashy, more on the principle of minimalism,
Yeah.
conservatism. I wanted to just share this general cost fee for those of you who are listening and watching. The typical international moving cost averages $10,000, and that is considered for an individual and based on where you're moving, based on your family dynamic. If you are single versus if you're moving with a family, the typical international moving costs. What's also factored into that is what you are bringing with you as it relates to relocation, the property value of that particular place where you're going to choose to live. I had to do a lot of research, and I just moved to another coast like a few years ago. That was Los Angeles, which is like a 21, 22-hour drive, a 3-hour flight from Houston. But there was so much research that had to go into that move, and even calculating my expenses, my current expenses, and how that would double when I got to a place that's cost of living was double the amount that it is here in Houston. So research, everyone, if this is something that you are considering. And I would even encourage, I know we're in a pandemic now, and I told my husband and a friend of mine the other day, I've got cabin fever so bad that I am going to try and find the most creative, safe way to travel because I miss it. It is a non-regrettable experience. It's one of the biggest educational experiences that someone can have. It definitely surpasses the value of money, of currency, because there is so much more life. This is something that I'd love for you all to have as a takeaway from this episode. Stepping outside of the box to pursue and explore something outside of your norm, outside of what you've been taught. Challenge yourself to engage in conversation with those who speak multiple languages, who have traveled abroad or who have lived abroad. And I think that whether you choose to move or not, immersing yourself in other dynamics and cultures and conversations can only expand the horizon of your mind, your knowledge, and your overall life experience. I think that it definitely elevates the currency of life. As we get ready to close, Tallie, I'm starting this podcast with having my guests to fill in the blank. So I'm going to ask you a question that I'd love for you to fill in the blank for. And before I do that, let us know how we can connect with you or how we can see more of your journey and connect with what you're doing to support you.
Right. Awesome. So I think best way is just to follow me on Instagram, madam.vogue, and I'm pretty vocal on my Instagram, and I really share a lot of my daily or weekly journey and bits and parts of my life and whatever's happening and my story with moving here. So definitely there.
Excellent. That's Instagram, you all. If you have an Instagram account, follow her. Did I spell that correctly? MADAME.Vogue. Is that correct? Yep. You can follow her on Instagram. Beautiful page. Madam.Vogue. You can follow her there. Let's see. We have 2 comments that have come in. I completely agree with the benefits of traveling. I told my husband when we have a child that this child is going to be the most well-traveled, well-cultured kid because it's so enriching and it's beyond what you could have locally been introduced to. Ms. Alexander, great podcast. Thank you so much. I do want to encourage you all to subscribe and connect to the Well Life TV and to my Instagram, LaShanna Leonard Moore. It's the same for my website, LaShannaLeonardMoore.com. And in closing, Tallie, let me know, fill in the blank. I am living in wellness best when I am blank.
I am living in wellness best when I am mindful and conscious of my self-care.
Mm. Mindful and watchful. What did you
Yes,
say?
or conscious of my self-care.
Mindful and conscious of your self-care. So good, so
Yes.
true. You all remember that self-care looks different for each one of us, but we need to have an awareness and a consciousness of it, and we need to implement it. Self-care could be from the routines to the mental awareness, to our social surroundings and the healthiness of our relationships.
Yep.
Wes, thank you for sharing. He says, enjoy Ireland.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all so much for joining me. Listen, be sure to subscribe, connect, send your comments for those of you who are catching the replay. And if you are desiring or interested in being a sponsor of the Well Light Podcast, you can email me at assistant@lashannaleonardmoore.com. Tallie, thank you once again. Love, peace, and blessings to you.
Thank you.
And everyone, remember as
Thank you.
always, and I have it on my shirt. Can you guys see my shirt? Yes. Our motto: eat well, think well, and live well until the next time. Bye bye.